Rachel. Joining me to discuss, Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano with the Heritage VP for National Security and Foreign Policy. Also, our panel of the day, we want to welcome in Kelly Sadler, former Special Assistant to President Trump, and we also have Alex Vogel, former RNC Deputy Counsel and former Senate Majority Leader Chief Counsel. Okay, a lot to discuss here. And James, we're going to start with you. Well, talk to me about Joe Biden. Do you think Americans should be worried about his policies abroad, specifically when it comes to China?
Well, you know, of course, I'm in a nonpartisan foundation. I don't know anything about politics. I do policy, and one of the things that's always kind of frustrating on the campaign trail is rhetoric on the campaign trail often doesn't tell you anything about how somebody will actually govern. If you go back to the McCain and Obama in, I guess, 2007, they sounded almost identical on the campaign trail. Yet, as President Obama's foreign policy emerged, it was dramatically different than when we talked about the campaign trail. And so I think there's always kind of that open question with somebody who actually hasn't run things. So here's what I will say. I think the way we have to approach this is what's happened the last 4 years as opposed to the 8 years before that. So everybody thinks we're in an era of great power competition, North Korea, Iran, China, Russia. Frankly, over those 8 years, we lost ground in every single one of those competitions. In contrast, in the last 4 years, I think we've made progress in every single one of those competitions. So if somebody's running against this administration, I think they would have to say, well, how can I do better than that?
Yeah, and as you're alluding to, President Trump, if we recall, he ran in 2016 with the idea of putting America first. And based on what we've seen in his time in office, Kelly, would you agree? Has the president delivered on that promise?
Well, absolutely. He's delivered in renaming Jerusalem the capital of Israel, something that other presidents promised to do. This president did. He got us out of the Iran nuclear deal that was negotiated by the Obama administration, and something that probably future President Joe Biden would try to go back into. He has stood up to China. He has tariffed China. Does Joe Biden support the president's tariffs? Would he keep them in place? What is his feeling on the Chinese concentration camps that are going on right now? With the Paris Climate Accord, President Trump said he'd take us out of that. He did. Joe Biden said he'd re-enter that and have standards that were significantly higher than what were negotiated in Obama's years. Joe Biden would be taking us back 4 years and everything that this president has accomplished.
And especially now, I mean, we're dealing with the aftermath of the coronavirus pandemic. I shouldn't say aftermath. We're still in it right now, and that's impacting Americans' health as well as the economy. And so, Alex, right now especially, how important is it that the person who's sworn in on Inauguration Day is going to be tough on China and hold China accountable for what has happened to America?
It's critically important. One of the things we have seen in terms of public opinion is a real engagement and understanding of the threat that we are dealing with and the competitive nature of that on a geopolitical basis, not just from a military perspective, but from a broader economic perspective. And one of the challenges that Vice President Biden is going to have, historically, he has tried to use his broader resume to justify his credentials. If you've been in government for 40 years and you've been the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee and you've been the vice president, the challenge for him is people like Secretary Gates. He didn't get into specifics, but I'm guessing that what he's referring to is broad platitudes are really nice, but when you get down to operational decision making at the presidential level, the vice president has been flat out wrong on a lot of things. And even if you go back to some of the great successes, if you will, of the Obama administration, the raid on bin Laden, we now understand the vice president was against it. Again, it's not enough anymore to just say that you know how to answer a phone call in the middle of the night. We now have a real comparison, a binary choice between President Trump, who said, this is my plan, this is my agenda, this is my view, and as was laid out earlier in this conversation, he has delivered concretely on those things, whether it's in Jerusalem or more broadly in our engagement with China. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, and James, just to kind of finalize that point there, the fact that we were listening to Obama's own defense secretary, Robert Gates, saying that Joe Biden has been wrong on foreign policy in the past, what could make Americans be convinced that that would change now? Anything?
Well, so I mean, let's look at China. I think that's the best example, where the Obama administration for 8 years practiced an engagement strategy on China, which was widely supported, including by the vice president, which was something he had actually supported his entire political career. We know that that strategy failed. This administration has a strategy of challenging China. We know that that's been more successful. So you have to ask, what are you going to bring to the table? If you're going to bring back, let's engage China, we already know that's failed. We've already figured that the right answer is challenging China. So the question for me is what are you going to bring for the American people that's going to make them better off?
Yeah. Joe Biden has said, that China is not an economic threat to the U.S. and that they're going to eat our lunch. So that's kind of at least an insight as to where he might stand. Otherwise, we have no idea because, unfortunately, he's not taking any questions from any unpre-approved reporters or sources. So we'll be left wondering there. Alex Vogel, Kelly Sadler, please stick around. A lot more to talk with you about after Safe. Here to weigh in, we welcome Republican New York Assemblyman Kieran Michael Laylor. We also welcome back our panel of the day, Alex Vogel and Kelly Sadler. And Assemblyman, all these fires and riots going on, this is pretty well documented. And yet protesters are being referred to as mostly peaceful if you were to ask some Democrats. What are your thoughts on it and the fact that we've seen this violence documented on tape?
Yeah, I guess other Democrats, Jerry Nadler, senators over on the Senate side in the hearing recently, they're just covering their eyes and pretending they don't see it. And if they don't see it, it doesn't exist. We live in a communication age. Everybody is a reporter. Everybody is a cameraman. There is video of all of this. You can access it in 3 seconds if you have a smartphone or a laptop. So you really have to go out of your way to ignore it. And they're ignoring it for political purposes. It hurts them politically because they can't come out and condemn the violence and the looting and the rioting because that's a big part of the Democrat base. That's where the energy and the direction of the Democrat Party is going. So they don't want to condemn it. But they also don't want to embrace it because regular New Yorkers, regular Americans, Republicans, Democrats don't want violence in the street. They don't want this unrest. So they put themselves in a tough position, and they've chosen just to bury their heads in the sand.
Yeah, of course, everyone wants their community safe and protected. And Alex, it makes you wonder, as the Assemblyman is alluding to here, that this is all political here. The fact that Congressman Jerry Nadler is referring to Antifa as a myth. I mean, what were your thoughts when you heard that statement?
Well, it's preposterous, and one of the things that it highlights is both challenges with how the media is often reporting or failing to report these issues, but also it highlights the rank politicization of what should not be political issues. Public safety matters. It matters if you live in an urban environment. It matters no matter where you live, blue state, red state. And one of the things that I think you're going to see in this electorate is that in places where a lot of this has been both ignored and really ginned up by politicians, perceived by them to be for their benefit, I think they're going to have some surprises from voters, especially places they thought they could make with in the suburbs. If you live in one of the places that's been affected by this, this is as real as anything that touches your life. And the idea that they can kind of skate by this and say it's a myth while benefiting from the political energy, they helped create this, and want to just ignore it, I think they're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah, I'm thinking about those business owners and residents in Portland and Seattle who did not sign up for this, and they were struggling throughout the coronavirus pandemic, those shutdowns. Now, on top of it, they're dealing with people showing up and burning their businesses. I mean, they've got to be looking for some sort of leadership who's got their best interest at heart, and it's just not coming from those mayors in those cities. And I want to point out what happened at a hearing yesterday before the Senate Homeland Security Committee. Kamala Harris, senator there, badgered acting Secretary of DHS Chad Wolf on pregnant women, specifically at riots. Listen to what she said.
Have you checked with medical experts about the impact of those chemical irritants on pregnant women?
Not on pregnant women, I have not.
I would advise you to do that.
Again, the
have any
less
DHS
than lethal munitions that we use in Portland occur between midnight and 5 a.m.
There are mothers, including pregnant women, who are attending these protests. I would advise you, sir, to consult with medical experts to determine the impact of chemical irritants on pregnant women.
So that's addressing the tear gas situation, which Wolf says is only used between midnight and 5 a.m. Harris there lecturing him for using tear gas on pregnant women. In the middle of a pandemic, the fact that this is becoming quite an issue. Kelly, weigh in on this for me and what you thought of that interaction.
Well, I thought that was a ridiculous interaction. And if you're a pregnant woman, perhaps don't go out on the streets to attend a riot between the hours of midnight and 5 a.m. Like, I don't know where we're lacking our common sense here. And the fact that Ted Cruz had a hearing on Antifa this week, where other lawmakers walked out, but the Democrats refused to condemn Antifa. And we saw this happen in Washington, D.C. A couple months ago, where bricks were placed in the roadways, and everything was organized. And Chad Wolf was correct to say it all happens after midnight. The mostly peaceful protests happen in broad daylight. That's when, if you want to go out and make your voice heard, you should. But it cannot be confused with the rioting that's happening after midnight.
Yeah. Two different things going on right now. We're sure to show you both sides of the story here at Newsmax. Assemblyman Kieran Michael Layler, thanks for coming on today and sharing your thoughts. We appreciate it. Alex and Kelly, stick around. We've got a lot more to talk about. Back with us to discuss today's panel, Kelly and Alex. And Joe Biden has committed to 3 debates, but he doesn't want any more than that. Kelly, what do you think is holding him back from facing President Trump more often?
The fact that he can't speak unscripted in public or conduct an interview that has some with friendly press, by the way, and have several unforced errors. The debates are going to be the most anticipated thing in this presidential contest now that both the Trump campaign can't get out there and hold rallies and Biden's hiding in his basement. It'll be the first time that Biden is actually exposed and asked questions and pressed for answers. I mean, you better believe that President Trump is going to hold him to task. So, of course, Joe Biden doesn't want more debates, and his team doesn't want more debates. They get so nervous when he does a 3-minute interview with a friendly media.
Yeah, and we've seen the results of that, too. Some of the statements that have come out that have been highly, questioned by those watching to really try to understand what he's trying to say, and offensive to some, quite frankly. Also want to talk to you both about the timing of the debates, what it means for Americans who are going to cast their ballots before September 29th. Of course, that's when the first debate is scheduled to take place. Alex, the President Trump has made it clear that he would like these debates to happen as soon as possible, just so that he can get out in front of the American public, and Joe Biden as well. Do you think that could ever happen? Would we see that, agreeing to do so from Joe Biden?
I think it's very unlikely that the Biden campaign is going to agree to it for the reason that was highlighted. Unscripted public debate with President Trump is a highly risky proposition for Vice President Biden. The debates generally in the past, Vice President Biden has not exactly overperformed, number one. Number two, the issue of timing, as has been pointed out a lot, we no longer really have election day in this country. We have election months. And given the amount of early voting that takes place and how voters make their decisions, it's important that they actually have a clear understanding directly from the candidates, unscripted and unfiltered, and the debates provide a wonderful opportunity for that. It's unfortunate, but I strongly believe that the people around the vice president will do everything they can to keep him in the basement and away from any debates before people start voting. So we probably won't get that chance. In fact, more interesting to me is whether or not the Biden camp, after the first debate, if it goes the way I think it will, somehow decide they no longer want to do the remaining two.
That's also an interesting perspective. Of course, that's assuming that it does actually happen. And they have committed to showing up for those 3 debates. Yet to be determined. The details, we're still waiting as to who might moderate it. And of course, those questions, it'll be interesting to see what's asked of both candidates. Kelly Sadler and Alex Vogel, thank you for being our panel of the day today. We really appreciate it. Great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You got it. All right, stay with